The head of a space program for 3 decades says they're here. Are you ready? I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this episode of Right Angles brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And gentlemen, there is a gentleman who's 87 years old. His name is Haim Eshed. He was head of Israel's space security program for nearly 30 years and also a retired general. And he tells an Israeli newspaper, it got reported in the Jerusalem Post and then got reported in the Daily Mail online, that there is a so-called Galactic Federation which has an underground base on Mars, and that they are not going to come into the open. The sense is that the aliens are with us, but they're not going to come into the open until we're ready for them. Because apparently at this point in our history, the thought is that we would panic if we found out the existence of an alien civilization. And Stephen Green, there is apparently a signed agreement between the United States government and the aliens to stay undercover, to conduct their research. They're doing some research here, apparently, on the fabric of the universe, and they're working with American agents to do that. But they're going to stay undercover. Now, Steve, I don't want to say anything unkind about an 87-year-old man, so I'm not going to. But it just occurred to me when I read this story, what's going to happen if someday we find out that there is an alien civilization, whether about to visit us or living among us? Do you think we will receive that news well? Do you think we'll be bored by it? Do you think it will change anything about the average person's day-to-day existence, assuming that these aliens don't invade us and start shooting?
Yeah, I love space opera, don't get me wrong. But the whole idea of traveling all this distance just to seize another planet, if you have the means to cross those vast distances, you don't really need whatever it is we have here. We're not that special yet. Although we're working on it. Maybe we'll survive that long. I certainly hope so. That said, I think we do all right. I'm a little biased on this one, I'll admit. Back when the X-Files was a really good show in the mid-90s, every time they showed Fox Mulder's poster in his FBI office, the one with the UFO on it that said, "I want to believe." That was it. I want to believe. I don't think they're here. I don't think they're coming anytime soon, but I want to believe. I agree with Ellie Arroway's dad in Contact, when she was a kid and asked, "Do you think there's life out there?" And he said, "Well, if there isn't, it's an awful waste of space." And I'm sentimental like that. I want to believe they're out there. And actually, I believe we'd handle it pretty well. There's a often overlooked, probably because it's a little dated, low-budget sci-fi movie from 1980 that I just love, even if it is so very late 70s. It hurts a little sometimes. It's an Alan Arkin comedy called Simon. And hardly anybody I know has seen this thing except for me. And I must have watched it on the Betamax 100 times when I was 11, 12 years old. And in this movie, Alan Arkin plays I think a community college psychology teacher who's been doing these experiments in what do you call it? Sensory deprivation. You know, where you go in the totally dark tank and float in the salt water and you can't hear, you can't see, you can't feel anything because the water is perfectly skin temperature and all the rest. And there is this top secret think tank run by these mad scientists who engage in stunts like the Nixon replacement program. The Nixon who went to China in 1972 was not the same one who came back. Little things like this, just this amazingly comical think tank. And they decide that people see UFOs because they want to. So why not give them what they want? And they take Alan Arkin, they hire him as part of the think tank, stick him in his own deprivation tank for like a week until his mind is turned to jello, and then they reprogram him to make him think he's actually an alien, and they sort of set him loose on the world, and comedy ensues. And I think that this silly, imperfect, half-forgotten movie is probably right on the money, in that not only would we be fairly blasé and welcoming about it, but I think we get a lot of comedy out of the culture clash.
Bill Whittle, you're an acknowledged space kid. I mean, I was just talking to a guy this morning, actually, who was praising your 4-part documentary, Apollo 11, What We Saw, which people can tap into at billwhittle.com. But this, you had to have thought at some time, as you're thinking about space exploration, what if we run into somebody else? This former space security program official says that the aliens, some of these aliens have made contact during the Trump presidency. And it says the aliens have asked not to announce that they are here because humanity is not ready. Goes on to say Trump was on the verge of revealing this alien existence, but the aliens in the Galactic Federation are saying, wait, let people calm down first. You see, they don't want to start mass hysteria. They want to make us sane and understanding. Bill, do you think we're sane and understanding enough to be able to receive visitors from another civilization off planet?
In 1993, I went back to the University of Florida to do a sketch comedy show, and I did one for 2 or 3 years down there. One of my favorite sketches ever. Worked with a really talented bunch of guys down there. One of my favorites ever was called Conspiracy Week in Review. And we had 4 of us out there trying to, push our most recent theories. And if I recall correctly, I think the one that I was most strongly backing was the idea that NASA was breeding Yetis to serve as in the reactor rooms on the fission reactors that are buried underneath the moon on the moon bases, because only Yetis can withstand that level of radiation. And the 2 moon bases, the secret moon bases, had been built by Disney, who had a lot of experience with this kind of thing, and they were codenamed Mauschwitz and Dachau. So I feel sorry for this guy who this is clearly signs of dementia. But the bigger issue is a much more interesting one. We are. You asked me how I felt when I was young, when I was in getting ready to go fly Mars missions, I was convinced that we would be making contact with alien civilizations at any time. I remember we did a show at the planetarium around 1973 or 74 when there was some evidence that there may have been a planet orbiting Barnard's star. It was very inconclusive at the time. Now we have more than well over 1,000 exoplanets. Maybe it's 10,000 now that have been discovered, something like that. And so the big question is, I think it's called the Fermi Paradox, and where are they? Why are we not getting any signals? And we aren't going to get any signals, and I'm sorry to say that. And the reason I can say that with such confidence is because we only have a very cursory idea of just how difficult life is. We would, and it goes up the scale. I think we're going to find life everywhere. I really think we're just going to find life everywhere. Complex life is going to be much rarer. Intelligent life is going to be rarer than that. And technological life, I think, is we will not see. And the reason for this is because the Earth is much more unique than we think. It's not just in the right place relative to the sun. Without the moon, there would be no intelligent life on the Earth. The moon took a bunch of impacts. The moon stabilizes our rotation. The moon does tides, which allows creatures to be like mud skippers, and looking at the moon is a source of a spark of intelligence. Figuring out when the next eclipse was really the invention of mathematics, and on and on and on and on and on. Jupiter vacuumed up all of the junk in the immediate area, which if it had not been there, if it hadn't been for Jupiter, there'd be no life on Earth. We'd have planets sterilizing collisions every 100 years or so. And you go down the list on and on and on and on and on. And what you find is that conditions on Earth are so unique and so utterly rare that we are not likely to see any alien signals. Now, when you have a universe with trillion stars in it, you're going to get other situations that are as unlikely as ours. But they're going to be few and far between. And every single day that goes by, the evidence for this gets greater. And I think it was Arthur C. Clarke said, either we're alone or we're not alone, and each prospect, either one of them is equally terrifying. I'm with Steve on this one. I think that there's an awful lot of really good real estate out there. As I say, I think life is everywhere, but intelligent life is, I think, extraordinarily rare. which is why I'm so proud to be a human being, frankly, and why I swim so hard against this tide of us being a bunch of killer apes, of cancer on the planet, and all the rest of it. It is amazing what the species is capable of doing. We were able to work the Big Bang backwards to Planck time, which is I want to say it's a 1/23 billionth of a second until after the Big Bang. We know what happened a thousandth of a second after the Big Bang. That's remarkable, amazing achievements for a bunch of monkeys with cantaloupes made out of jello in their heads. I would be very pleasantly surprised if that's the case, but I used to think they'd be everywhere, and now I don't think they're anywhere near at all.
You know, I work in a really big store in my other full-time job, and it's huge. And I can't tell you how many times same scenario has happened. A customer comes in, I'm helping them look around to find something. They're not finding it. And at some point, they become exasperated about the fact that they can't find this exact thing that they were looking for. And they say something like, you know, I just thought with a great big store like this, I would just be able to walk in here and grab something and go home. And I just knew that it had to be there because I wanted it to be there, is what they're really saying. I expected it would be there because I had already made it in my mind. And so when I came to the store and found that it wasn't there, it seemed impossible that it could not be there because I already saw it. I pictured it. And, the movie line that Steve quoted is great. It was, if there isn't life out there, what a waste of space. It made me think, though, that there's another way of looking at that. If there isn't life out there in that vast expanse of space and the trillions upon trillions of stars, it's also possible that all of that, as Bill suggested, is what's required to make this. All of that has to be there as a precondition to create something as magically rare and precious as life, where we live on an orb where life springs up in acidic liquids that are fissures in the floor of the ocean. Everywhere that life can emerge, it does on planet Earth. And nowhere else have we found that even a little sprig of a leaf pops up from the barren soil. It's a really miraculous thing to think of. I don't think that our buddy in Israel is going to be breaking any real news when it comes to this. I think that if aliens were to show up, we would find out that they mostly came from human wombs born here on planet Earth, and I think I already know some of those people. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.